Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Steven Universe episode review. This one's going to be for Season 4, Episode 5, Future Boy Zoltron. This was a very average episode. Uh, I questioned coming on this video and just immediately saying this was a bad episode. I'm holding back just because I think part of it is that since I started reviewing Steven Universe, I haven't really had a point where I've just got an episode and it's a much lower quality to the rest. Because when I was first started reviewing, obviously we were in the middle of the Summer of Steven event and we were getting like 5 episodes a week basically. And so even if that week had maybe not a great episode, it was kind of limited in how like negative I could be about it because in the video where I reviewed that week, I was going to get to a good episode. This is the first time reviewing an individual episode that it's just kind of like this is the only episode we're getting this week and it is really not that good. And I think part of that is making me feel like it's really bad when I think it's just a deeply average episode. That there's not a ton to come out of this. There's not a lot to discuss about this episode. Um, so I just want to get that out of the way first. The problem with this episode is that I feel like it's a debate about do you discuss this episode purely for what it is, or can you bring in the potential around what this episode could be, and that is purely based around the fact that we are in season 4. As far as we know right now, the show is going to basically end with the end of season 5. So we've got the rest of this season plus one next season to go. So we're on kind of like limited time, and it really feels like there's not that much space left in the series to resolve all the important stuff, but also have these episodes that are not very meaningful. And especially with the amount of stuff that the show's been vague about up to now and still has to reveal, it's these episodes really come across that as filler episodes. Like, I'm if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I'm fairly like light. I don't really heavily go into like criticize filler episodes. I think they can work and stuff like that. But this just I don't think was a particularly strong episode. I don't think anything of note really comes out of it. Even in terms of developing Mr. Smiley as a character who we basically know nothing about, I don't really think that this episode has much of an impact on him as a character. Because I can't really see Mr. Frowny, the new character we're introduced to in this episode, coming back. I can't really see the impact of that really changing Mr. Smiley because we barely know Mr. Smiley. I think the impact it has on Steven and what he potentially learned in this episode also doesn't mean a whole lot because it was just a kind of weird episode where he pretended to be a fortune teller with people he knew, and then a person he didn't know came in, so he got a temporarily kind of use of Garnet's future vision and couldn't resolve it, but then he says something just from his own feelings, and this sort of changes the way Mr. Smiley approaches dealing with the reunion with Mr. Frowny, and so that changes the future or the potential for the conversation, and they kind of make up, and it's fine. It was just not a great episode. Like, I think objectively, this just as an episode on its own, taking away the disappointment about the fact that we were on such a great roll of episodes, and this has kind of really brought the show back down to earth and really just stopped an amazing run of episodes. This, just as an episode itself, I don't think is very strong. They could have done a Mr. Smiley focused episode and the kind of premise for this episode in a much more effective way. This just really felt like filler episodes because literally it felt like, oh, we've got this many episodes to go. Why don't we do this as an episode? It felt like they were just filling in a number, and that they didn't have any other plan to immediately follow up the last episode, so they just put out this random episode. And I know that's being very harsh, but I personally don't see a lot in this. Now, I'll readily admit there are Steven Universe fans out there who do care a lot more about those more minor human characters. I personally don't, because I don't feel that that's what the overall focus of the show is about. and I don't feel you need to focus on them all that much. I ultimately think they are probably building up to a moment when probably Yellow Diamond will arrive that will force basically the series to enter roughly its end game, where we will shift very much away from dealing with humans outside of just the crystal gems need to protect humans, and shift more into the actual battle to change Homeworld and kind of really reignite the rebellion and kind of get into where the series is going by the end. Uh, have all the big reveals come out. I think just the way the show is right now, where we've only really had the rubies kind of arrive and come back in terms of referencing the potential arrival of Yellow Diamond in response to, obviously towards the end of season 2, that's when the whole Peridot insulting Yellow Diamond happened, and we're still waiting for that to be resolved. I think we're building to that arrival, and I'm thinking that what they're doing is basically getting the last little episodes where they want to focus on the beach city residents out of the way, because they know that it just would make no sense that once they're in the final kind of arc, final battle, it doesn't make any sense to really go back and here's an episode focused on Onion, here's an episode focused on Mr. Smiley, because reason. So I think it's just a lot of factors with this episode that lead me to just think it's extremely average. Like, this episode, I don't think will be remembered for barely anything once we're a few episodes down the road. This is just an episode, and that's why I more err on the side of calling it a filler episode, because I really don't think it has any impact on any of the main characters. I even think that the minor characters it focuses on, it doesn't really have much of an impact there, because I really don't think, I think Mr. Smiley of a lot of them other human characters is very low on that list. Like, I think if you've got a lot of other characters ahead of them, Lars, Sadie, Ronaldo, and a lot of those other characters I think are way more interesting than just Mr. Smiley. So, I sort of appreciate them kind of saying that, look, we've introduced Mr. Smiley as a character, we at least want to give him something, but we're in season 4. This is not really what we want the focus to be on. And I've seen a lot of people, the initial reaction to this episode, a lot of people kind of going like, oh, I'm really glad that we have a break from all the heavy gem stuff. And I'm just kind of here going like, really? Like, why? Like, it's not like this show is overloading us with information. They're just teasing a mystery still. We're getting these little reveals here and there, but they are little in the grand scheme of things. They're hinting at bigger things, but I don't think any of it's been like unbelievably, unspeakably huge that we need to like, oh, I need 5 episodes of filler episodes to calm down from this. This show has a lot of history to delve back into in regards to the rebellion. It's got a lot of development to do for characters like Steven and I suppose even like stuff like Peridot. I still think you have to develop her more so she's properly part of the team. Lapis probably still has a little bit more development to go through, and I think there's other stuff you need to touch on, like Amethyst. Like, I don't think you fully resolved her arc from the end of season 3. So I just don't really get us needing a break. Purely because I don't feel the episodes have been like so intense that we need the break. I think it's a little bit kind of out of place that we're suddenly taking a break from everything, because I thought even though Mindful Education kind of brought up the idea of, like being open with your thoughts and like having people around you to kind of help you through them so they don't consume you, I still think that that episode emphasized that Steven is dealing with such big stuff that he still has a lot to go through with that and a lot of development to happen from that. So it felt a little bit weird that we're just getting to this episode where he's just not thinking about that. Garnet is the only gem we really see in the episode outside of Steven being like half gem. But yeah, I suppose like talking about the plot of the episode itself, just the idea that Steven breaks the Zoltron thing and then has to pay for it by acting as it, and he gives good advice to the people of the village who don't recognize him in all the makeup, and because he knows them all so well, can give them like effective advice. versus this random guy, Mr. Frowny, arriving, and he just doesn't know him, and he's trying to react to the questions, and he just doesn't have anything to say, and that's when like Garnet just arrives out of nowhere, obviously predicting the future, knowing that Stephen would be in this predicament, and that's the fun part of Garnet's power, isn't that? Because she has the future, she knows when she kind of needs to give someone else her powers to deal with something. So that was her fun little appearance, was one of the highlights of the episode for me. Um, but how they used his powers was a little bit weird in that I get what they're going for in that these are the three possible outcomes of Mr. Smiley going to talk with him. He's going to say this, it's not going to work. He's going to say this, it's not going to work. He's going to say this, it's not going to work. Either way, it's going to end in sadness. And the only thing that changes it is Stephen basically presenting the idea of, but like, were you happy after all of this? And so that changes Mr. Smiley's perspective a little bit going into the conversation. So he approaches it in a different way, and it ends up resolving it somewhat effectively. And the two of them kind of make up. They realize that their act, kind of worked. He finally gets the joke and doesn't take it as seriously, and they seem to be friends again. But Mr. Frowny still goes off at the end. So it felt like a very throwaway episode because they didn't have a final scene to kind of fully just hit home, like, okay, like, we'll meet up again, we'll do our comedy shows somewhere else, we'll talk a bit more. It just felt like, okay, you got the joke now, bye. And so the episode itself didn't have any impact because they didn't like finish the arc that they were actually going for. So I'm going to end it there before I start repeating myself and getting overly negative, but I really felt like this episode missed the mark in terms of where the series is at this point. We didn't really need this episode at this point in time. And then just judging the episode on its own as an episode, outside of like its placement within the series, I still don't think it was a particularly well done episode. And I definitely would question why the writers, producers, directors thought that this was a good idea for an episode. As I said, I appreciate them recognizing that, look, we've introduced this character, Mr. Smiley, he's relatively underdeveloped, let's give him an episode. But, as I said, we're in season 4, we don't need this. He's not so important that we need that. So that's how I feel about the episode. And I'll just end by saying, as I said at the start, this is my first time reviewing an individual Steven Universe episode that is a big drop in quality compared to the rest. Like, I've seen the entire show. I know that the show has huge up and downs. But recently the show has been very good. It's been pretty high quality. Even some of the more fillery, episodes like this earlier on in the Summer of Steven, like the New Lars, the Keys delivery service. Those were like fun, even though they weren't the greatest episodes. This one just didn't really feel like a good episode at all. Huge drop in quality, and that's the first time I'm dealing with that in reviewing an individual episode. And I think that's why maybe I'm being a little bit overly negative compared to what most people who are maybe used to the up and downs of the show week to week are. So I'll just say that as I end the review. So let me know your thoughts on the episode. Am I being overly negative? Did you in any way like this episode or enjoy it? And just in general, your thoughts on this and where you think the show is going, and does the show need episodes like this? But yeah, just end by saying, if you want to follow me on social media, links to my Twitter and Tumblr are in the description. And also, if you want to support my channel so I can make more videos, better videos, links to my Patreon page and also my PayPal donation link are in the description as well. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.